What do my dreams actually mean? The brain doesn't switch off at night. It keeps tracking what mattered today and what might matter tomorrow, and it builds a rough stage where those things can meet. That stage is a dream. It pulls faces, places, and moments from memory, and it lets emotion push the story forward. People ask if a dream is a message with hidden symbols. It isn't a secret code. There's no shared dictionary where a dog means loyalty or a train means change. Meaning lives in the pattern. A place or object stands in for a feeling because your brain linked them through experience. So, what's it doing? Part of it helps file memories by testing which links hold and which fade. Part helps tune emotions, like easing fear by replaying it in safer form. In REM, when eyes twitch and the brain is highly active, dreams feel vivid. In deeper stages, they're plainer, more thought-like. So, if you want meaning, look at the feeling that sticks and the problem that's half solved. A recurring dream often marks a worry that keeps returning in life. It isn't prophecy. It's you, working with what you care about, practicing choices and endings, so you're a little more ready when morning comes. Why do I dream about the same things over and over? Because the brain loves patterns, and it keeps working when we're off duty at night. It gathers the day, and it asks what matters and what still needs sorting. If something felt open or risky, it gets flagged. So the mind returns to it, and it runs the moment again. At night, the memory system plays scenes to shrink and file them, and strong feelings turn up the volume. That's why the same hallway, the exam that slipped by, or the wave that never stops can appear. The shape is familiar, but the details shift because the brain is testing angles. There's another layer. Minds predict what tomorrow will be like, and they practice. So we get threat drills and puzzle drills, like being chased or our teeth breaking. If life keeps pressing the same button, the drill repeats. The loop isn't punishment. It's rehearsal until the pattern feels understood, and it changes. When the feeling shifts, or the problem is faced, or a new path opens in daylight, the scene often changes too. Sometimes it ends, sometimes it becomes something else. The message isn't hidden treasure, it's a simple signal. It repeats so it can learn, and it changes when we do. Why can't I remember most of my dreams? We think dreams vanish because memory isn't a simple recorder. It's a careful gate. When the mind turns inward at night, the switches that stamp experience into long-term memory aren't fully on, so the scenes play, vivid for a moment, and then they slide off the page. We can explain the chemistry. The brain's memory hub, the hippocampus, needs certain signals to mark an event as keep. During dreaming, those signals change. The chemical that helps focus and tag moments, noradrenaline, drops, and the front of the brain that organizes stories goes quiet. So encoding is weak. Recall also depends on timing. If we wake right in the middle, fragments survive, but minutes later, they're already fading. It's state dependent, like trying to tune a station from the wrong room. And dreams rarely have solid anchors, places, dates, and stable faces, so there's little for memory to grab. Yet some do stick. Strong emotion helps, and telling the story right away helps, because you're handing it to waking memory while the doors are open. Forgetting isn't a flaw. It's the mind keeping the shelves clear for daylight, while night can explore and rehearse without filling the archive. Why do some dreams feel so real? It's odd, isn't it, that a dream can borrow the texture of a day. The brain doesn't power down at night, it shifts. In a phase called REM, vision, sound and touch areas blaze as if signals were coming in. So the scene is built with the very circuits that build waking life. At the same time, the part that questions and checks, the prefrontal cortex, goes quieter. So the story isn't challenged, it's just lived. Emotion circuits run hot, which boosts color and urgency. The body is switched off, and outside noise drops, so the brain trusts its own signals and paints in the gaps. And because the brain is a prediction machine, it uses models learned from life. Streets keep their corners, voices keep their timbre, gravity mostly behaves. Memory feeds fragments of places and faces into the mix, and the map system joins them up. When the pieces fit, the world holds together and feels solid. Sometimes it bends, and we notice only when it breaks. But when we wake, the ones that felt real linger stamp into memory, so they feel true for the simple reason they're built from the same machinery, with the guardrails lowered. Can dreams predict the future? It's tempting to say yes, because now and then a dream lines up with what happens next. But we dream many scenes, and the world offers many chances to match them, so coincidences are bound to appear. Our brains are built to predict, and when we dream, that prediction engine keeps running through memories and worries. At night, the brain shuffles recent moments, old habits, and small clues we barely noticed, and it stitches them into rough simulations. Emotion turns the volume up, and strict logic takes a back seat, so the scenes feel bold and strange. Those simulations can point toward likely outcomes like rehearsals for tomorrow. So a dream of a storm before a bad day or an exam going wrong can feel prophetic because the pieces were already there. We also remember the hits and forget the misses, and sometimes we sharpen the memory after the event so it seems exact. That's how premonitions grow without magic. Can dreams predict the future? They can explore possible futures, and they can help us notice risks and ideas we hadn't faced in the daylight. But they don't fix what will happen. They help us prepare. When one seems to come true, it's our model of the world landing close to reality. Why do nightmares happen, and how do I stop them? They tend to appear in the most vivid dream stage, when feeling circuits are loud and the brain's brake on worry is turned down. The threat detector fires easily, and the part that weighs things is off to the side. So, fear gets center stage, and the mind stitches a story around it. That story often has a job. It's a rehearsal for danger, a way to learn without risk, like a nighttime fire drill. Stress, grief, pain, fever, some medicines, alcohol, or stopping drugs can push that system. Irregular schedules and disrupted breathing can too. Children meet more nightmares because their fears are new and big. To ease them, lower the fuel and steady the pattern. Keep regular times for bed and waking. Get morning light and save caffeine and alcohol for earlier. Give your mind a simple wind down, the same each night. Write the nightmare. Change the ending to a safe turn and practice that new script while awake. If they repeat or follow trauma, talk with a clinician. Imagery rehearsal and CBT for insomnia are well tested, and medicine is sometimes used in PTSD. When one wakes you, name 5 things you can see and remind yourself the story has ended. Nightmares are the mind trying to learn, and they can be taught. Do dreams reveal my true feelings? It's tempting to think dreams are a secret diary of the heart, but they're closer to a workshop. At night, the brain loosens the reins, and a stage called REM appears, when eyes flicker and the mind is busy. The planning parts quiet down, and the emotion circuits speak up, sometimes very loudly. What they show, more than anything, is feeling in motion. They often reveal feelings that are already active, because the mind replays pieces of the day, old memories, and small fears, and it tries out responses. It's like a night rehearsal for life. Threats, joys, and unfinished business get more airtime because they matter. But dreams also distort. They swap faces, stretch time, and turn a tiny worry into a tidal wave. That doesn't make them false, it makes them loud. A test panic dream might be about feeling judged at work. A flying dream might be about relief after a hard choice. So treat them as hints. Ask what feeling sat at the center, not what plot played out. Then look for where that feeling lives in the day. If nothing fits, let it go. Some nights are noise. And when a dream lingers, it's often because a real question is waiting for light. Why do I dream about people I haven't thought about in years? Memory isn't a neat cabinet, it's a living web, and dreams wander along its threads. When the mind wanders on its own, it replays what matters now, and it tests old links, and sometimes it brushes past faces we've stored and left alone. We didn't summon them, the path simply ran close. When we dream, the brain sorts and edits, so it strengthens some paths and weakens others, and nearby memories get tugged. A smell from the day, the rhythm of a voice, a small worry about belonging can match an old pattern, and the web completes the pattern. Up comes that person, because their shape fits. Feelings act like highlighters. An old friend or rival might still carry a trace of joy or sting, even if the story's gone quiet. Dreams use them like actors in a quick rehearsal, to try out moves without cost, and to update the little map of how people work around us. So those faces appear not because they matter again, but because they're good examples for a question the mind is working on. Sometimes it's just noise, a stray echo with no meaning, and sometimes it's a nudge that a link is being remade. We borrow the past to make tomorrow make sense. Is everyone in my dream actually just me? I think the honest answer starts with this. The people you meet there are made inside one brain, and it's yours. The brain builds a little world, then fills it with faces, voices, and rules, drawn from memory and feeling, so the stage can run on its own. In that world, the brain does something clever. It doesn't just write a script, it predicts. It runs both sides of a conversation at once, using the same machinery that reads real people during the day. That's why a character can surprise you, because many quiet processes are guessing in parallel. And they're built from others as well as from you. A teacher's tone, a friend's laugh, a stranger's stare, stitched from fragments. It feels like someone else because your model of them has weight, and when the model speaks, it pushes back. Dreams may be practice for social life. So, are they just you? They're you as the world maker, carrying traces of everyone you've known and countless stories you've learned. They're not separate minds, and they don't know more than you do, but they show something lovely. One mind can hold a crowded room and act it out. How much control do I really have in my dreams? Dreams can feel like a private universe, and it's easy to think we're in charge. Most of the time we aren't. The brain is improvising, image and emotion turned up, the planner turned down, so scenes flow on their own. We ride them, and our choices tug, but they rarely steer. But sometimes a light comes on, and we know we're dreaming. That's a lucid dream. Awareness brings a bit of the planner back, so we can pick an action, set an aim, and the world often follows. It's not command, it's guidance, like leaning into a bike that's already moving. Control works through attention and expectation because they prime what appears next. Point attention at flying and the sky opens. Expect a door and one arrives, but there are limits. The dream draws from memory, fear, desire, habit, so it pushes back with surprises. And strong emotion can pull awareness away. So, how much is really ours? Enough to notice, choose, and nudge, not enough to design every detail. More when awareness is steady, less when feeling surges. It's closer to surfing than building the sea, and it's still us on the board. Influence without ownership, which is a powerful kind of control. What makes the brain start a dream in the first place? It begins with timing. The brain runs on rhythms set by the body clock. About every 90 minutes, a circuit in the brainstem flips. It quiets the chemicals that keep attention sharp, and it floods the cortex with signals. Eyes twitch, muscles are held still. and the stage is set. That switch is called REM control, and it's old and deep. That switch is called REM control, and it's old and deep. Cells in the pons start firing, sending bursts to the thalamus and then the cortex. It comes like waves, and because outside senses are mostly gated, the brain turns inward and looks for a story. Prediction is what the brain does best, all day. At night, the same machinery keeps running because it rarely shuts off. Emotions from the amygdala press their case. Memory traces are replayed and mixed, and the default networks start stitching. The result isn't a movie we watch. It's a world we try to explain. So, a dream begins from a mix of timing and chemistry and need. The rhythm opens the gate, the brainstem lights the theatre, and the cortex fills it to make sense of itself. We wake with fragments, but for a while the model took over, and we lived inside our own prediction. How does the brain choose what images to use? Not like a gallery where it picks a picture. It's a guess the brain builds when the outside world goes quiet and the senses stand back. The prediction engine keeps running, so it turns inward. Memory lays out fragments. Emotion leans on them. And the brain's seeing area turns them into images. So, what gets picked? Recent things rise first because the memory index in the hippocampus is lively. Strong feelings give them weight, as the amygdala, the brain's emotion hub, says, "Remember this," and loose links snap on. A face pulls a place, a tune pulls a day, and the story starts. There's learning in it too. When REM, when eyes flicker and the brain is active, sweeps through, movement and place circuits often replay, and the brain rehearses patterns. It runs what-if scenes, like practice with the lights off, so images follow tasks, fears, and goals. Bits of yesterday mix with older maps, and they guide the plot. And that's why it feels both random and meaningful. The gates to the senses are low, so noise creeps in, but the chooser is still biased toward what matters now. Recent, emotional, half-finished. The brain isn't selecting pictures from a shelf. It's building a story to learn and to prepare. Why do dreams ignore logic and basic rules? Maybe it's because, when we dream, the brain builds a world from the inside out, and the usual referee takes a break. The part that checks facts and keeps plans straight goes quiet, while emotion and image grow loud. Scenes snap together because they can, and cause doesn't have to line up with effect. During a REM, the stage is bright. Chemistry shifts, stress and mood signals rise, and the tidy organizing ones drop, so the mind runs hot and loose. Awake, senses keep our model of the world tied down. Dreaming, that model runs without outside checks, so it drifts and loops. Memory is busy too. Bits of yesterday and years ago replay and mix, as if the brain is testing what matters and where to store it. It stitches fragments into a story on the fly, and that stitching creates sudden jumps, strange blends, and perfect nonsense that still feels true in the moment. And it feels true because the circuits that paint vision and feeling are vivid, while doubt is dim. Logic returns when we wake and the world pushes back. In dreams, the rules loosen so the mind can explore, rehearse, and heal. It looks chaotic, but it's a useful kind of chaos. Why do dreams jump between scenes instantly? It's odd, isn't it? Because in waking life we move through doors and roads. But in dreams, we're in the kitchen then, on a train, with no in-between. That happens because the brain isn't taking in a world, it's building one. And building means it can swap blueprints in a heartbeat. The moment a new idea lights up, the stage can be rebuilt. In REM, the stage when the eyes flicker and the brain runs hot, the planner parts go quiet, and the image makers surge. So continuity checks drop away. Memory, emotion, and stray thoughts link up by meaning, not by distance or time. One strong association pulls focus, and the whole scene reassembles around it. There's also the rhythm inside the brain. Bursts of activity sweep across vision and memory, like internal camera cuts. The hippocampus replays fragments, the amygdala boosts what feels urgent, and reality testing is dialed down. With little sensory input to hold it steady, the mind takes the fastest path between thoughts and space snaps. So the jump isn't a glitch. It's a feature of a story written on meaning. A train follows a kitchen because the idea does, and the set changes to match. When we're awake, senses keep scenes glued together. In dreams, the glue is loose, so imagination edits at the speed of a thought. Why do dreams mix people and places that never belong together? Because the mind doesn't store life as full scenes. It keeps parts, a face, a staircase, rain, a feeling. When we dream, those parts float free, and the brain tries to join them. It's a storyteller and a scientist, testing links and asking what fits. With no new sights, it sorts. In the day, senses keep it anchored to real streets and real names. At night, those anchors lift, so it roams through memory. It hunts for patterns. If two moments share a mood or a shape, they get pulled together. A classroom can slide into an office because both hold the same pressure. Emotions are strong tags. Fear, joy, pride, loss. They light paths between distant times. So a new friend can stand in a grandparent's house, not because they met, but because they carry the same warmth inside. And while it replays the day, it edits and strengthens, splicing pieces to save the useful parts. That mixing is a feature, not a glitch. It lets the mind try out futures and test new links and solve problems sideways. Some blends are nonsense, but even nonsense shakes loose an idea. When the world is quiet, the brain keeps learning, and the strange pairings are how it prepares for what's next. Why do we feel strong emotions in dreams over things that don't matter? Because the brain builds a world with feelings before facts. In dreams, the planning part of the brain goes dim, and the systems that tag danger and reward stay loud. So a tiny slight, a missed train, a crooked button can feel enormous, because the feeling arrives first, and the story scrambles to explain it. There's a reason for that. The brain is a prediction engine, always testing what-if stories. In dreams, it runs them without the usual referee, so the spotlight of emotion swings freely. Fear rehearses escape, curiosity pushes into new turns, and embarrassment checks. Social maps, all at full volume, without real stakes. Meanwhile, memory is being sorted. Fragments from yesterday get woven into strange pairings, because the brain is trying out better patterns. Emotion is the tag that says keep this or let it fade. Without real consequences, the tag can be oversized, so a small scene carries a huge charge and sticks. So the mismatch is not a flaw, it's training. Feelings act first to tune the system, and dreams provide the stage. We wake with echoes because the practice spills over and meaning catches up during the day. It's a reminder that our deepest machinery runs on feeling, then builds the world around it. Why do dreams replay stressful moments? Stressful moments stick because the brain marks them as important. In dreams, that marker pulls the scene back on stage. It isn't punishment, it's a workshop. The mind runs the memory again, changes angles, and asks what mattered. It's trying to fold the shock into the story of a life, so it fits. In some phases of dreaming, emotion runs high, while the usual brakes on logic are loose. That mix lets the brain pair a hard feeling with new context, and the danger softens. It's like safe exposure. The body stays still, the heart learns the shape of the fear, and slowly it stops shouting. There's also rehearsal. The mind plays the scene to test moves without cost. Run, speak, forgive, fight, freeze, try again. By morning, the map of what to do is a little clearer. even if the memory still hurts. That's why many worries feel smaller after a night of strange storylines. But it can misfire. When stress is heavy or recent, the loop repeats and grows sharp, and the fear doesn't fade. That's when help matters, because the network can be retuned. Most of the time, though, replays serve a purpose. They teach the brain that the story can be carried and changed. Why do we dream more during certain sleep stages? The brain doesn't dream evenly through the night because the night isn't one state. It runs in repeating stages, and one of them, REM, is special. In REM, the eyes twitch and the body is held still, yet the brain lights up almost like waking. That's the stage that pours out vivid scenes. Why? The networks that build images and emotions are busy, and the parts that check facts and keep order ease off. Brain chemistry tilts toward imagination. Signals from the outside are muffled, so the mind uses its own memories and guesses as raw material, stitching them into moving pictures and strange stories. But dreaming doesn't vanish outside REM. In lighter non-REM, there are fragments, like thinking with pictures. In deep non-REM, slow waves roll across the cortex, and big groups of neurons fall in and out of step. That quiets the inner theatre, because the brain is busy restoring energy and stabilizing memories. The stages cycle every 90 minutes or so, and REM grows longer toward morning, so total dream time swells late in the night. We also remember more if we wake from a dream. Put together, it's simple. We dream more in REM because the brain is freer to imagine, and the timing favors recall. Why do small real-life sounds become part of the dream? Because the brain doesn't switch off at night. It only turns the volume down. It keeps watch while it builds a private world. And it hates loose ends. So when a faint sound slips through the gate, the story reaches out, catches it, and gives it a roll. That gate is a filter in the middle of the brain. It mutes sight and sound, but it never closes completely, because missing a threat would be worse. And in dream-heavy phases, the mind is busy predicting what should happen next, yet the ears still pass along small clues from the room. So the brain does what it always does. It explains the noise. A dripping tap becomes rain on the window, and a distant siren turns into music drifting through a street. The goal isn't accuracy, it's coherence, so the model holds together and the dream can keep moving. And there's a deeper reason. We evolved to balance vigilance with rest, so tiny sounds are tested. If they point to danger, the body rises. If they don't, the mind spends them like spare change inside the scene. The world leaks in, and meaning stitches over the gap. Why do we sometimes dream in third person? The mind builds a small model of the world, and a model of us inside it. At night, that model loosens, so scenes can bend and rules can waver, but the story engine keeps running. Point of view is part of that model, so it can float, detach, and watch the self like a character. Parts of the brain that keep track of our body and our viewpoint can drift when oversight is low, so they place us outside the scene. Memory works this way too. We can recall a day from the inside, or as an observer. Dreams reuse that machinery, especially when feelings are strong or confusing. Seen from outside, the self becomes a figure in a landscape, and that gives space to map cause and effect. It can blunt fear or let the mind test choices without the rush of being inside the moment. And culture shapes it because we watch films and games that teach this camera shift. So, third person isn't a glitch. It's the same modeling system choosing a vantage point that best stitches a story together or keeps us steady enough to learn from it. Sometimes we're inside the skin, and sometimes we're the watcher. Either way, the mind is rehearsing a life it hopes to understand. Are dreams a way for the brain to process emotion? It's a fair guess, isn't it? Because dreams feel like the mind taking a deep breath after the day. Through the night, the brain runs its own workshop. It replays moments, stirs old memories, and blends them with feelings. And it does this without the usual noise of action and consequence. One clue comes from a stage called REM, when the eyes flicker and brain activity almost matches daytime. Emotional networks fire strongly, while strict reasoning dials down. Stress chemicals drop. That mix lets the brain reframe events, so the facts stay, but the raw charge can ease, like turning down a volume knob. You can feel it after a hard argument. Later, a dream spools out a scene that isn't literal, but carries the same heat, and it plays to the end. By morning, the memory is still there, yet it bites less. Nightmares arrive when the system struggles, or when danger keeps demanding to be rehearsed. The evidence points to a big part of their job being emotional work, though they do more. They link ideas, test threats, and shuffle what matters from what doesn't. They're messy, and they don't always help, but across many nights, they nudge feeling toward balance. It's the mind keeping itself whole while the world goes dark and still outside. Do dreams help us remember things or forget things? Dreams feel like the mind tidying the day, but the job is bigger than that. At night, the brain isn't resting. It's sorting. It's testing memories, tagging some to keep and letting others thin out. So the honest answer is both. And that's how memory stays light enough to work. We feel the story, not the sorting. During the vivid phase when our eyes flicker, patterns from the day replay. Brain cells that fire together fire again, and that strengthens the path between them. Emotions act like highlighters, so strong feelings push a trace to the front. Dreams weave new facts into old maps, and skills settle in. But there's another task. If every detail stuck, thinking would be crowded and slow, so the brain weakens stray links and trims copies. Dreams may be the sense of that cleanup. As scenes jump and blur, ideas stay, trivia fades, and noisy connections stop stealing space. For the brain, forgetting is a feature. So, remembering and forgetting aren't rivals, they're partners. Keeping everything would swamp us, and losing everything would erase us, so the mind balances the books each night. Dreams sit on that workbench. They make the important easier to find, and by clearing them, they let tomorrow's learning take hold. Do nightmares serve a purpose? It seems strange that the mind invents danger when we're safe in bed. A nightmare feels like a mistake, but it may be a rehearsal. The brain spins a story where the stakes are high, and we're forced to act, so it can test its map of danger without real risk. It's like a fire drill for the inner world. During vivid dreaming, the parts that feel fear surge, and the parts that think and control quiet down. So emotions run hot, and the story can twist. That mix lets memories and feelings meet, and the brain tries new links. If the monster chases, the mind also learns how to turn and face it. After a harsh dream, the body is alert, and the day can look sharper. We avoid a risky turn, or we reach out to someone we've ignored. Sometimes the plot repeats, and that repetition matters. It can be a noisy alarm, pointing to stress, trauma, or habits that need changing, not a prophecy. But there's a line. When nightmares crowd the night and leave us worn down, the system is stuck. Changing the script while awake can help because the brain learns the new ending. In the end, yes, they often have a job to do, train for danger, sort emotions, and ask for care when something's wrong. Can dreams reveal fears we haven't noticed? Dreams can be a small theatre where the mind tries out life without the normal guard on. We call it strange, but it can be useful. At night, control quiets and emotion grows loud, so hidden worries have room to move. The result isn't a report, it's a story, stitched from memory, feeling, and stray detail. During a stage called REM, when the eyes flicker and images surge, emotion circuits ignite while the planning parts go quiet. So the mind solves problems sideways. Being chased down a corridor can echo a week spent avoiding a hard talk. The classic missed exam scene often points to fear of being unprepared. Still, it isn't a codebook. Symbols shift from person to person, and what matters most is the feeling on waking. If the same theme returns, and life around it is tense in the same way, that's a link. Dreams can surface what the nervous system has already sensed while attention looked elsewhere. They aren't prophecies, and sometimes they're noise, like static on a radio, but often they run threat rehearsals, so fear can be felt and faced in safety. In that sense, yes. Dreams can reveal fears we hadn't noticed, not by telling us, but by letting those fears move in plain sight. Can dreams help solve problems? Sometimes we wake and something fits that didn't before. A knot in a plan loosens, or a line of code appears, or a tune finds its next note. It feels odd, but it's not magic. The brain doesn't stop at night. It shifts gear and starts playing with patterns. During one stage, our eyes flick and the mind is vivid. Control eases in the parts that police ideas, and links spread between far apart things. Memories are replayed and stripped to their shape. So pieces that were stuck can move, and the dream puts them together in new ways. We see this in simple tests. People who rest on a puzzle are more likely to spot a hidden shortcut. If they dream about the task, the odds rise again. Not because the dream speaks in riddles, but because it carries the problem into that freer workshop and tries options. It doesn't work on command, and it won't replace hard thought, but we can seed the mind by thinking through the problem before bed, then let it run. Dreams widen the search space, and they surface odd but useful trails. So yes, they can help, by opening doors we missed. Why do dreams react so strongly to stress? Because stress stamps strong signals on the brain, and dreams replay those signals and stitch them into a story. The alarm system, the amygdala, fires more, and the manager at the front eases off, so feelings run louder than reason. That's a recipe for vivid scenes and quick twists. In REM, when the eyes flicker and the brain lights up, the mix of chemicals changes. One messenger, noradrenaline, dips, which can make it safer to revisit charged memories. But control from the front is low, so the story engine improvises, and intense fragments blend with old memories and fears, producing striking emotional images. Stress also tags moments as urgent, so they get priority in replay. The brain likes to rehearse threats, test options, and imagine escapes, because practice helps survival. So deadlines become chases, arguments turn into storms, and the setting shifts until a pattern shows. The pressure of the day becomes a training ground for the night mind. Often, this rehearsal helps. Each pass can loosen the grip of the feeling, and the scene grows less sharp over time. But with heavy, ongoing stress or trauma, the chemistry may stay high, and the loop sticks, and nightmares repeat. Dreams react strongly because they're built to feel, and feeling is how the brain learns. Do dreams make us more prepared for danger? It feels like they might. Nights are full of strange rehearsals, and the brain loves a rehearsal. Dreams pull bits of memory and fear into little stories, and those stories test us. We run, we hide, we argue, we fall. It's chaotic, but it's also practice without the cost of real danger. That idea has a name: threat simulation. The mind builds a rough scene, turns up emotion, and tries out responses. Heart and breath rise a little, the body stays still, and the emotion circuits light up. So the brain can learn which actions lower the alarm, and which choices make it worse. There's some support. Dreams contain more threats than daily life. People who rehearse better endings for nightmares often feel braver later and their stress drops. Training that changes a nightmare's plot can soften fear in the day, but it isn't simple because repeating terror without change can carve the fear in deeper. So, the answer is yes, but not cleanly. Dreams can tune our maps of danger, reduce false alarms, and prepare quick moves when it matters. They don't predict the future, and they can mislead us too. Still, a mind that practices in the dark tends to be readier in the light. Can dreams influence our decisions when awake? I think they can, and not in a magical way. Dreams look like stories, but they're the brain trying out actions without risk. They pull bits of the day and older memories, and they stir feelings. So by morning, some choices feel heavier, and some feel lighter, because they've been weighed in there. We also carry the mood from a dream into the day, and mood bends choice. A harsh chase can make us cautious. A warm reunion can make us brave. The brain also strengthens some links while we rest, so an idea rehearsed in a dream can feel familiar, and we trust the familiar. Sometimes a dream stitches pieces into a plan we missed by day. Problems loosen their knots when rules go quiet, so the brain tries odd combinations. We wake with a hunch to call someone, or to try a different route, and that nudge can be a decision already half made. But dreams aren't oracles. They're guesses guided by feeling, so we should treat them as clues, not commands. Even so, they work like a simulator for risk and reward. Threats are rehearsed, rewards are tasted, and the traces steer us. We step into the day with a map we didn't know we drew. Can dreams change how we feel about someone? This happens more than we think. Not by magic, but because the brain uses dreams to test stories about our lives. It takes scraps of memory and mixes them with hope and fear, and it lets emotion run hot. So when someone turns up in that theatre, the feeling can be vivid and real. In that state, the parts that spark emotion are busy, and the parts that check and balance are quieter. So the brain builds strong links. A face pairs with safety or threat or longing. Then morning comes, and those links don't vanish. They linger, like dye in water, and they nudge how we read that person. Dreams also help us tidy yesterday's feelings. A sharp fear can be sanded down, or a dull concern can be sharpened. And there's a quirk called rebound, where the more we try not to think of someone, the more they show up. The meeting, even imagined, can move an opinion one notch. It isn't fate, though. One strange night doesn't rewrite love or trust. But repeated dreams can tilt our habits of feeling, because practice leaves traces. We can notice the echo, ask what stirred it, and choose what to do with it. And that choice is where the story of us keeps changing. Do dreams actually mean anything? At night, the body powers down, but the brain keeps working, sorting and stitching the day. Senses go quiet, and the inner model of the world takes the stage. So images flare and rules bend. That's a dream. It isn't random noise, and it isn't a secret code. It's ongoing brain work made visible. In rapid eye movement, the eyes flicker, and brain activity climbs, and memory systems replay patterns while emotion circuits surge. The storytelling parts try to make sense of bursts from deeper layers, so a narrative forms. That's why dreams feel vivid and strange. They often track what matters now: fears, hopes, problems waiting for shape. Before big tests, many people dream of missing the room or forgetting a line because the brain is rehearsing stakes and errors. After loss, faces return and feelings soften a little because emotion is being processed. The threat dream, the flying dream, the awkward stage dream. Each mirrors a system practicing or settling. So do they mean anything? Yes, but not as prophecies or fixed symbols. Their meaning is practical and local, a snapshot of learning, feeling, and prediction running in the dark. They can nudge ideas together and ease stress, and sometimes reveal a worry not yet spoken. That's enough meaning to matter. What triggers a lucid dream? It often begins in REM, the stage with darting eyes and vivid scenes. Most of the brain accepts the story, and we go along. But sometimes the system that checks what's real stirs. When that system lights up while the dream keeps running, awareness arrives inside the dream itself. This system sits in the front of the brain, behind the forehead, and it handles planning and self-checking. In ordinary dreams, it's quiet, because that helps the world feel seamless. A tiny rise toward wakefulness, a brief micro-awakening, or a chemical nudge can switch it back on without breaking the scene. What nudges it? Habits that train awareness help, like simple reality checks in daytime, or holding an intention to notice that it's a dream before bed. Waking for a short while, then returning in late REM, boosts the odds. Light or sound cues delivered in REM can slip into the story as a signal. Biology matters too. REM runs on acetylcholine, a messenger chemical, and when that rises while alertness rises a little, lucidity becomes more likely. Some people with narcolepsy or irregular nights report more lucid dreams for that reason. So the trigger is a meeting point. The dream stays strong, and the part that knows wakes enough to notice. Why can some people control their dreams? It begins with a flicker of knowing. The brain is making a world from memory and guesswork, and for a moment it realizes that this world is its own. That shift is called lucidity, and once it's known to be a dream, intention stops being a passenger and starts steering the scene. Usually the parts that watch our thoughts are quiet during vivid dreams. In some people, they spark back on. That brings self-awareness, like a light in a theatre. Practice can help. Simple habits that question reality, or steady attention from meditation, make that light easier to switch on. And some just notice odd details, so they catch the moment something can't be real. Control is less like pushing buttons and more like setting strong expectations. The brain is a prediction engine, so clear aims bend what comes next. When flying is imagined, the lift is felt and the model fills it in. The body is held still by the brain, so all the change stays inside the map. It doesn't work every time, and it isn't total. Too much awareness and the dream breaks. Too little and the thread is lost. So the skill sits in a narrow band. When it lands, the storyteller and the character are the same mind, and that feels like catching its own echo and turning it into action. That's a rare kind of freedom. Why do we forget dreams the moment we wake up? We open our eyes and the story is right there, and then it slips like mist through fingers. It isn't carelessness. Through the night, the brain runs in a different mode. The network that spins images is busy, and the system that saves long-term memories is turned down, almost as if on standby. Memory needs a signal that says, keep this. In waking life, that signal is strengthened by chemicals and by steady attention. During dream-rich stages, those memory signals are low, and the part of the brain that timestamps events is quieter. So the dream plays vividly, but it isn't stamped with the tags that help recall. Then comes waking, and that shift is abrupt. Heart rate lifts, light hits the eyes, and outside, sounds jump in, and the brain starts updating the map of the room. New input pushes aside the fragile traces that remain. It's a kind of state change, like switching channels, and the last channel loses its grip. We do remember some, especially if we wake in the middle of a dream and rehearse it at once, because saying it or writing it lays down the tags the night didn't. But most vanish. The mind protects daytime thinking from overload, and the strange worlds fade, leaving a faint feeling that something happened. What causes sleep paralysis? There's a moment when the brain changes gear between dreaming and waking, and most of the time the shift is seamless. In dreams, the body is switched off so we don't act them out. It's a safety lock. Sleep paralysis happens when we wake, while that lock is still engaged. During REM, the brainstem blocks signals to most muscles, a state called atonia, while heart and breathing keep going. If awareness returns before movement does, you're awake inside a body that won't answer. The chest can feel heavy because the rib muscles are muted, and the mind can fill the gap with vivid shapes. Those figures and footsteps are dream images leaking into waking sight and sound, because the dreaming networks are still active. It's more likely when people are short on rest, stressed, jet-lagged, or on shift work, and in narcolepsy. It can run in families, and lying flat on the back makes episodes more common. It usually lasts seconds or a minute, and then the motor switch releases and movement flows back. The fear fades as the systems line up again. So the cause is a mistimed handover between two normal states, which shows how close waking and dreaming live on either side of a thin border. Why do dreams continue for a few seconds after we wake up? It happens because waking isn't a single click. The brain moves between modes, and the change takes moments. The networks that build images, voices, and feelings are still firing, while the systems that anchor us to the room are just coming online. So awareness comes back inside a story already in motion, and it carries on. The brain is always predicting what's next, and dreams are that prediction engine running without much outside data. When waking starts, outside signals rush in, but the gates and brain chemicals don't flip all at once. Vision and memory are still projecting. So the inner story competes with the first light, the first sounds. That's why a face from a dream can blur into a pattern on the curtain, and why it feels real for a heartbeat. The part of the brain that checks facts is slower than the part that paints pictures, especially in the dark and in stillness. So the picture holds, then buckles as the world pushes through. It only lasts seconds because the handover is quick. As light, touch, and gravity stream in, the story machine is pulled into line with the room. The same tissue makes both dreams and waking sight, so no wonder the join is smooth. Those few moments are simply the handover, when the outside takes charge again. Why do we sometimes hear voices in dreams that we don't recognize? Dreams are built from the inside out. The brain is both stage and audience, and there's no air moving, no mouth speaking. Yet we hear. Because hearing is partly a story the brain tells itself. The sound areas light up and language areas join in, so voices appear as living patterns. We don't store perfect recordings of voices. We keep traces, bits of tone, rhythm, accent, and where we heard them. The brain blends these scraps and builds a fresh voice. It also predicts what would make sense next, so the scene holds together. A stranger appears to fit the moment. When we're awake, we match a voice to a face and a place and a history. In dreams, those checks relax. The tag that marks identity doesn't fire because cues are missing and control is turned down. Feeling takes the lead, so fear or wonder can shift pitch and make identity float. It hints at something larger. The mind isn't just a recorder, it's a maker. The same system that lets us plan and hear inner speech can invent a person we've never met, using pieces we gathered across a lifetime. So the unfamiliar voice is ours, made fresh each time we dream. Why does the dream version of us behave differently from the real one? Because in dreams, the brain runs on its own power, with the senses turned down. It isn't being corrected by light, sound, or touch, so it predicts instead of reports. The rules bend, time skips, faces blend. In that space, habits and wishes have more room, so another version of us takes the lead. The part that plans and checks is quieter, and the parts that tag danger, reward, and meaning are louder. The chemistry shifts too, so memory fades fast and doubt is low. It's like the brakes ease and the engine keeps running, so we act faster, stranger, and with more confidence than we would. Identity loosens because the mind is stitching from memory pieces. A friend becomes a teacher, a street becomes a beach, and we accept it. With the body lying still, action carries no cost, so the mind can test moves. Sometimes it practices threats, sometimes it plays out desire, guilt, or hope. So the dream self isn't fake. It's us, under different rules, when feedback from the world is quiet and imagination supplies the world instead. It shows what pushes us when no one is watching, and when we wake, we return to the shared world, but we've seen the range we contain. Can two dreams connect across different nights? Sometimes it feels like they do. A scene returns, a face looks the same, and the story seems to carry on. It's strange, because dreams aren't stored like episodes on a shelf. The brain builds them as it goes, from memories, worries, and hopes, stitched together in the dark. During REM, a stage when the brain is active and the body is still, memory systems replay and sort the day. The hippocampus, the part that files new memories, can spark old networks. If last night left a strong trace, the same network can light again tomorrow. So patterns repeat, not as copies, but as echoes. Familiar places and characters often return. The brain is a pattern maker, and it fills gaps with what fits. We can even nudge it. Writing a dream on waking and picturing it before the next night raises the chance of a sequel, and lucid dreamers manage this more often. It's not a guarantee, but the odds move. But there isn't a fixed realm that waits across nights. The link lives in memory and story, and sometimes it's built in recall, as the waking mind smooths the edges. Even so, it feels real, because the feelings are real. Two dreams can meet when the same lights turn on. Why do some dreams feel like they come from outside ourselves? Maybe because the mind isn't just a camera, it's a prediction machine. When the world goes quiet, the brain keeps building, the senses fall back, but imagination surges, and the parts that question source and authorship ease off. So scenes arrive as if delivered, not made. Crucially, the same circuits that see and hear the outside world light up without real input. Vision paints, sound speaks, and because those systems evolved to track things out there, the signals feel external, and the inner editor in the front of the brain is quieter, so the story isn't challenged. Emotion and memory stir the pot. Bits of yesterday mix with old scenes and private fears, and the brain guesses a path through them. With no real world to push back, the guesses run wild so they can surprise us. We often drop into the middle, which heightens that foreign feeling. So, that sense of otherness isn't magic. It's a side effect of world-making without supervision. Perception is always a construction, and in the dark, it shows its scaffolding. Here's the simple truth. The same machinery that finds reality by day can invent one by night, and we believe it. What actually happens in the moment the dream collapses? There's a tiny switch in the brain's politics. All night it's been running a private world, drawn from memory and desire, while the gates to the senses stay low. In REM, the eyes dart and the body is still, and the inner picture wins the vote. Then something tilts the balance. A bright sound, a hint of light, a full bladder, or just a ripple from deeper circuits. The brain's relay opens the doors, and the chemistry shifts toward wake. Alert signals rise, the inward signals fade, and the system starts trusting the outside again. Subjectively, the set comes apart. Faces lose their edges, rooms stretch, the plot breaks into pieces, and a single real detail gains weight. The beep has shape. The sheet has texture. Muscle control creeps back as the night paralysis loosens, often over a heartbeat or two, sometimes with a jolt. The collapse isn't a failure of story. It's a handover of control. The brain chooses the model that best explains the strongest signals, and the world in the room beats the world in the head. In lucid moments, even noticing the trick can topple it. One breath, and the stage is gone. Why do certain dreams repeat throughout life? Some dreams do come back, not because the dreams are magic, but because the brain is a pattern maker. At night, it replays and edits memories, and it strengthens paths it thinks matter. So certain networks fire together, and the same scene forms, like a well-worn route through a forest. Strong emotion is the glue. When a memory carries fear, shame, desire, or awe, the brain tags it and returns to it when life rhymes with it. And there's rehearsal. We dream of threats or tests because practicing safely helps. The mind reuses a known stage to run the drill. That's why there's the lost exam, the chase, the fall, the empty stage. Each is a shorthand for a question. Am I prepared? Am I being followed by a problem? What happens if I let go? The details shift as we grow, but the template stays because it's easy to assemble fast. Over decades, the mind keeps a model of the world and of us inside it, and it updates that model each night. Recurring dreams are markers of unfinished work. They fade when the load lightens and return when life presses. Not omens, but maintenance, a simple sign that continuity matters. Why do stressful weeks cause more vivid dreams? Stress winds up the body and the brain. By day, we hold it together, but at night, the gates loosen. The control systems ease off, and the deeper circuits get louder. That's when vivid stories rise. Not because we're broken, but because the brain is trying to make sense. Under stress, hormones like cortisol and adrenaline stay high. They change how the brain cycles through the night. There's a phase where the eyes flicker and the brain is busy making pictures, REM. Stress can push this phase to be more intense, while the quiet, restorative phases get lighter. And when the night is lighter, we wake more often. Those tiny awakenings pull a dream to the surface, so memory grabs it before it fades. The emotional centers, like the amygdala, run hot, and the planning centers step back, so the stories feel raw, bright, and oddly true. There's a reason for this. The brain is filing the day, testing fears in safe trials, and tying loose feelings to memories we already hold. A stressful week feeds it more to work with, so the theatre gets louder. The dreams feel vivid because the system is doing its job. Why do childhood dreams feel clearer than adult dreams? Maybe it's because the mind in those early years runs with fewer breaks and the pictures have room to bloom. At night, the senses turn down and the inner stage lights up. Children spend more time in that picture-making state, and the editor at the front isn't fully in charge yet. That state is helped by brain chemistry that boosts images and emotion, so scenes feel bright and odd. And because a child's world is mostly new, the brain treats many moments as important, and it tags them. Those tags carry into dreams, and they help the memory hold when morning arrives. In adult life, the picture shifts. There's less time spent in that vivid stage, and waking is often sharp, with alarms and tasks waiting. Thoughts rush in, and that wipes the trace before it settles. And with years of memories, new dreams have less contrast, so they blur into the background. And memory is a builder, not a camera. A childhood dream that survives gets told again, and each telling sharpens the edges. Adult dreams rarely get that care, so they fade. So the clarity we notice is part vivid making, part careful keeping, and it stays with us for years. Why do dreams replay old regrets? Because the brain's job isn't to keep the past tidy, it's to learn. Regret is a bright flag that says, something here still matters. So at night, when the world goes quiet, and the mind is off the hook for action, it goes back. It reopens the moment we wish we could change, and it starts testing meanings. Memories aren't shelves of facts. They're patterns we rebuild each time, and the brain can mix the picture with the feeling, because that's how it updates. The body rests, but the mind fires, and groups from the past get reactivated together. The old choice, the sting, the what if, they light up in the same circuit. So the dream runs the scene again and bends it. It tries a different line, a braver step, a pause we didn't take, because rehearsal changes memory. We think it's punishment, but it's practice. The mind is asking, if this happens again, how do I act, and how do I carry the feeling without breaking? Sometimes that work eases the sting, and sometimes it makes it louder, because strong signals get priority until they're understood. When the lesson is learned in daylight, the replay often fades. Not erased, just settled. Dreams return to old regrets because pain marks value, and the brain is trying to turn value into wisdom. Why do some dreams feel like warnings? Because the dreaming brain is a prediction machine still at work. It takes scraps of memory, current worries, and little signals from the body, and it runs them forward. So a story appears that tests danger. It isn't telling the future, it's practicing for it. And practice often feels like caution. In dreams, the brain's alarm centers fire more, and the careful, planning parts ease off. So fear and surprise get loud, and doubt goes quiet. The result is a vivid scene that insists it matters. It's the old animal system running drills, while the editor who checks facts is off the floor. We wake with a racing heart and the pictures fade, but the feeling stays. That's because emotion tags the memory as urgent and the tag lingers. The brain also pulls in real sounds or pains and wraps them as threats, so a siren outside or a tight chest becomes a story of danger. So some dreams feel like warnings because they are warnings, but from us to us. They point at patterns we've missed and rehearse what to do if they're true. Not omens, rehearsals. It's the mind scanning tomorrow's edge with yesterday's data and trying, in its way, to keep a life intact. Why do dreams bend time? Maybe the simplest answer is, our brains don't keep time like a clock. They feel it. In waking life, we use daylight, sounds, and our own movements as anchors, so seconds stack neatly. In dreams, those anchors fall away, and the brain is free to stitch moments by meaning, not minutes. When attention and planning parts are quieter, the little inner metronome weakens. The brain builds scenes from memory and prediction, and it jumps. A hallway becomes a mountain, and the gap feels natural, so time folds with it. Strangely, if dreamers try to count seconds, they're often close to real time. So story time stretches, while body time ticks on. We feel the same trick when a book pulls us in and an hour vanishes, or when boredom makes minutes crawl. Time is a story our minds tell from changes we notice. Dreams pack changes tightly, and they edit too, skipping the dull parts, so the story grows long in fewer heartbeats. Out there, the universe rolls on, second by second, with patient regularity. In here, the measure is change, attention, and memory, so it flexes. Dreams bend time because the mind isn't counting, it's composing. And when meaning leads, minutes follow, and a night can hold a lifetime. Why do we dream of falling? It often arrives as a shock, a step into nothing, and we're suddenly back in the room. The mind isn't trying to frighten us. It's doing its oldest job. It keeps a model of the body under gravity, and it checks that model as we drift out of awareness. Inside the inner ear, there's a tiny balance system that feels pull and motion. As muscles loosen and breathing slows, those signals shift, a bit like the first instant of a drop. So the brain runs a fast test and sometimes fires a sudden muscle kick, a hypnic jerk, to catch us. When the dream deepens, the body is held still, but the maps for movement still light up. The brain blends faint motion cues with memory and fear and play, and falling appears. It's a simple template the mind knows well, because edges and drops have mattered for as long as we've walked. There's another layer too. Dreams often rehearse threats, so we practice without cost. A fall is pure danger and clean physics, so it's perfect for rehearsal. Put it together and it makes sense. We dream of falling because a human brain lives under a planet's pull, and it never quite stops guarding us. Why do we dream of being chased? It's one of the oldest scenes our minds stage, and it makes simple sense. Long before cities, the biggest problem was not getting caught. So the brain keeps a night theatre for threats, and running is the clearest script. It's cheap to rehearse danger in imagination, and the cost of missing it is high. In these vivid phases, the body rests while the brain's alarm circuits spark and the planning voice goes quiet. So fear is loud, story is loose, and motion takes over. A chase appears because it links a danger with a clear goal, because move now is a simpler rule than argue or negotiate. And it isn't only ancient tigers. Modern pressure wears new faces, but the nervous system tags it with the same label. Deadlines, blame, a harsh look. They all feel like pursuit. Our legs go heavy in the dream because the body is held still for safety, and the mind translates that into syrup. So, being chased is our practice run. It tests roots, feelings, and timing, and it lets us wake with a trace of the map. The scene is scary, but it's also a sign of a brain that won't waste a crisis. It turns fear into motion, and motion into a plan for next time. Why do we dream about teeth? It's one of the most common dreams, and it feels strangely vivid, because the brain at night is stitching scraps of sensation and memory into a story. It grabs what's loud in the body and what matters in our lives. Teeth sit right there. They're hard parts we show to the world, and they're wired with feeling. Often, there's a simple trigger. Jaws clench, or grind against a tooth, or a bit of gum aches, and faint pressure turns into a signal. The brain guesses at a cause, because that's what it does, so it fills in a picture of loosening, cracking, and loss. A tiny nudge becomes a whole scene. But it isn't only sensation. Teeth are about eating and speaking and how we look, so they carry status and survival in one place. Losing them means weakness in a very old sense, and we all remember, somewhere, the wobble and the gap from childhood, so big change gets mapped onto that memory. So, there isn't a secret code. There are patterns. Teeth dreams rise when stress is up, or when identity is shifting, or when the mouth is working hard at night. If it repeats with sore jaws, it's worth checking. Mostly, it's the mind rehearsing loss and repair, then letting us wake a little wiser. The question is, why do dreams use symbols instead of direct images? It's odd that the mind seems to speak in code at night. We want a straight picture, but we get a flooded house or missing teeth. That isn't coyness. It's how the brain works when it's running without the world. The senses are mostly quiet, so it builds from memory and feeling, not live input. During REM, when the eyes flicker and the brain is lively, vision areas fire and emotion circuits are loud, while the tidy checking part goes quiet. So the mind thinks in pictures and urges, not neat words. It searches its web for a pattern that fits the feeling, and up comes an image that carries weight. We also store meaning as associations, not files. Losing control might link to falling, exams, or breaks that won't work. The brain compresses a messy bundle into a single scene. It's like lossy compression. You keep the shape of the feeling and drop spare detail, so the dream looks symbolic, and it makes sense inside. And there's a purpose. At night, the brain is updating memory and testing its rules, so it needs to generalize, not replay. Symbols are shortcuts that let it try ideas quickly and stitch new learning to old maps. They feel strange because they're ours, built from our lives, and they say more than a direct picture could. Why do dreams create strangers who feel familiar? Because the brain keeps two kinds of knowing. There's the quick feeling of, this is known, and the slower pull of names and facts. In dreams, the fast feeling can fire on its own, and it's persuasive because it helps the story move. So a face arrives, and it already carries a yes. That face isn't conjured from nothing. It's stitched from scraps you've seen 1,000 times. A neighbour's walk, a teacher's eyes, a cousin's grin. Mix them, and the pattern matches just enough to trip the familiar light. And the scene adds feeling, so the face comes warm or wary before any name. The brain's editor, the bit that cross-checks and argues, takes a back seat, so the story doesn't get stalled by doubt. We accept the label and carry on. It's close to déjà vu in daytime, when the familiarity switch flips without a source. In dreams, that switch flips often, on purpose. We're built for other people, and our minds expect company. Dreams use that expectation to rehearse trust, loss, and risk. So they need characters that feel tied to us. The fastest way is a stranger assembled from our own past. Familiar because it's ours, and unknown because it's new. Why do dreams give us abilities we don't have? In the dark, the brain isn't taking in much from outside, so it turns inward and runs a model of the world. It's a simulator, and when the gates of reality ease off, that model relaxes its rules. Gravity can bend, time can stretch, and skill can seem instant. During REM, a stage when the brain is busy and the body is still, the chemicals that shout error signals go quiet, and the ones that stitch associations go up. The part that checks facts steps back, while areas for images, emotion, and movement light up. So actions run like rehearsal, without real risk. We swim through air because the brain is testing what if, using pieces of memory and learned patterns. It feels true because there's no incoming data to contradict it. No weight in the muscles, no pull on the skin. So the prediction stands, and the simulator rewards it with the feeling of mastery. By morning, the world returns with friction and noise, and the limits come back. But something remains. The brain has explored a path it hadn't tried. Sometimes that becomes a new insight or a steadier hand at a task, because practice can happen in imagination, and imagination is part of how we learn. Why do dreams hide faces? Think about those nights when a room is full of people, and somehow the faces won't land. That's not a trick. When we dream, there's no light coming in, so the brain paints from the inside. It uses scraps of memory and guesses, and it builds the gist first, because that's cheaper than detail. Faces are special though, and they're fussy. In waking life, face-reading circuits lock onto eyes and mouth and shape, and they keep them steady. In dreams, the stabilizers are turned down, and the reality checks go quiet, so the picture wobbles. The story and the feeling take charge, and identity becomes a sense. It also moves too fast for fine print. Scenes flip, the viewpoint jumps, and inner eye movements sweep the image. So high detail stuff like eyes and text falls apart. Working memory is short, so the brain fills the gap with labels. It swaps faces or leaves them sketchy until a strong memory cuts in. So dreams don't hide faces on purpose. They're building the world from hints, and faces are the hardest hint to render without the world's light. When the need is sharp, the face arrives, and when it isn't, the person travels as a thought. It shows how much perception is a guess made live. Why do dreams distort familiar places? There's that strange feeling when a street you know is also an endless hallway. It looks right and wrong at once. That happens because the brain doesn't store places like photographs. It stores fragments, roots, doorways, smells, feelings, and it rebuilds them on the fly from whatever pieces are close at hand. When we dream, the world comes from the inside, not the senses, and the part that checks facts is quiet. Memory and emotion are loud, so the brain fills gaps with the strongest links. It guesses the next piece of the pattern, and the guess isn't exact, so corners stretch and doors open onto impossible places. There's also the brain's inner map at work. It uses tiny signals that fire for locations, and they replay old routes and test new ones while we're dreaming. The map can stretch or rotate as it tries options, so the park shifts uphill, the school grows extra floors, and a familiar turn now leads to the sea. So the distortion isn't a mistake. It's the brain taking the gist of a place and exploring what else could fit, guided by feeling and memory. That's why it feels known and surprising at once. We wake with a trace of that search, because the world we carry inside is still being built. The question is, why do dreams switch tone instantly? Because a dream is the brain running a story without the outside world to steady it. The mood isn't anchored, so it can spin on a coin. The mind is predicting and stitching as it goes, and it leans on memory and emotion to guide the next scene. Change those, and the whole world tilts. In deep dreaming, the part that checks facts and plans ahead, the prefrontal cortex, goes quiet, and the alarm and reward circuits run hot. The amygdala shouts, the brakes are soft, and chemistry shifts the rules. Acetylcholine is high, which boosts vivid images, while norepinephrine is low, so we don't fix on one threat, we drift. That means a tiny spark can flip the feeling. A face reminds us of loss, and the room becomes a cliff. A laugh echoes like danger, and a chase begins. There's no real input to push back, so the brain accepts the new mood and rebuilds the scene around it. Fast, because that's cheaper than arguing with itself. There are also jumps between dream phases and brief wake-like ripples, and each comes with a different mix of signals. The brain keeps the story going by backfilling, so the cut feels instant and smooth. In that way, dreams show a simple rule. When reality is off, emotion chooses the meaning, and the world follows. Why do dreams feel quieter or louder than real life? In a dream, a whisper can crash like thunder, and a slam can land like cotton. That odd flip tells us something simple. Loudness isn't in the air, it's in the brain. Ears turn pressure into signals, but the brain sets how big they feel, like a hand on a volume knob. In everyday life, the world pushes in with steady force, and bodies and rooms give a sense of scale. So the brain keeps its levels matched to that stream. In dreams, the gates to the senses are mostly turned down, and the scene is built from memory, image, and emotion. With less input, it adjusts the gain. Sometimes it raises inner signals so a drip booms, or it lowers them so voices thin out. The chemistry shifts too. Arousal chemicals drop, parts for careful control step back, and emotion regions run hot, meaning takes the lead, and the mix follows whatever matters most. So a shout can be vast, not because air moved harder, but because the brain turned up belief. Or everything can feel hushed, because there's no hum of the world to anchor it. Dreams aren't measuring sound, they're arranging meaning, and that's why their volume serves the story, not the room. Why do dreams ignore the rules of physics? Because they're not running on the outside world. They run on the brain's model of the world, and that model is free to bend. When vision and touch from the senses go quiet, and the body is held still, the brain keeps predicting. In REM, the simulator stays on, but it isn't corrected by reality. In waking life, gravity and time feel firm because constant signals push back when our guesses are wrong. In dreams, that error signal drops, and the frontal systems that check logic relax, while image and emotion networks surge. So the story engine improvises. And it doesn't need to ask what a falling body should do. That's why we fly, or breathe underwater, or walk through doors that become oceans. Time stretches because memory is laying snapshots, not film, and the mind stitches the gaps. It blends places and people because the rules it's using are meaning and feeling, not mass and force and clock time. It isn't physics that changes, it's the tether. The brain is running a sandbox to learn, to rehearse threats, to explore ideas without cost, and it trades accuracy for possibility. Then we wake, and the sensory stream grips the model again. The world takes its shape, and the spell lifts. Why do some dreams feel long, even though they aren't? Time inside a dream isn't read from a watch, it's made. Without daylight, or a ticking second hand, the brain guesses. And it guesses by building a story. Scenes link, meanings grow, and that chain is what we feel as time moving. When the eyes flicker and the brain runs hot, emotion areas surge, and the parts that check order go quieter. So the sense of minutes loosens. A chase can hold a whole city of detail in a blink, and hard cuts can skip hours, while meaning holds the thread. On waking, memory isn't a tape, it's a sketch. We recall highlights and strong feelings, not the gaps, so the mind fills and smooths. It adds a before and an after. A 2-minute burst can feel like a long road because the edit suggests a journey. There's a test too. In the rapid eye phase, when people try to count seconds, their counts often match real minutes. So dreams aren't stretching time, they're bending how we read it. Meaning sets the pace, not clocks. That's why short dreams can land as something vast. Why do dreams trigger real physical reactions? We've all woken with a racing heart, damp palms, or a laugh still on the breath, and the room hasn't changed. So how can a picture in the mind move muscle and blood? Because to the brain, an imagined world and a seen world share the same roots. Neurons that build sights, sounds, and danger light up together, and the body listens. During REM, the phase when the eyes flicker and the brain is busy, emotion centers surge and the planning parts ease off. The story feels true, and the alarm network sends signals down the wires. Heart rate rises, breathing shifts, and sweat glands open, like they would in a real chase. But there's a brake on movement. The brainstem throws a safety switch that quiets most muscles, so legs don't run and arms don't swing. It doesn't stop the automatic systems, so the heart keeps taking orders, the chest keeps working, and the eyes track the scene. Tiny twitches slip through, and tears, or arousal, can too. Why keep that link if the world isn't there? One idea is practice. The mind runs threats and puzzles at low cost, and the body joins in, which keeps the whole loop tuned. So a dream isn't fake so much as a rehearsal of reality. It's a model vivid enough to move the body that carries it. Why do we wake up sweating from harmless dreams? Because a dream can be harmless and still feel urgent. The brain notices intensity before it checks the plot, so a sudden fall, a sharp face, or a near chase can trip the alarms. The automatic wiring fires, heart rate jumps, blood vessels tighten, and sweat switches on. When we dream, emotion circuits like the amygdala and the hypothalamus get lively. They talk to the fight or flight system that runs sweat glands. The body is mostly still, but the automatic side isn't off. It sends bursts, heart and breath wander, and skin dampens to dump heat. And it doesn't need fear to do that. A harmless story can still be charged by stress, left over from the day, by a full stomach, or by hormones. Near morning, our core temperature rises. Blankets trap heat. And in some dreaming phases, temperature control is less steady, so a small rise triggers sweat. So the answer isn't the dream's plot. It's the body's rule to act fast. The old survival circuits fire on a hint of trouble, imagined or not, and the sweat glands open. We wake damp because the signal felt real for a moment, and that was enough. Why do we dream in first person most of the time? A simple way to see it is this. The brain builds the world from inside a body. It keeps a map of head and hands, and it uses that map to make sense of everything. When we dream, the same map runs, so the scene forms around that vantage point. It's the default, and it carries over. There's little input from eyes and ears, so the brain has to predict. The easiest prediction is, I'm here, looking out. Memory helps too, because many memories are stored from our own viewpoint, so replay brings that view back. Imagination when we're awake does the same, and dreaming rides that same machinery. To see yourself from outside takes extra work. It needs self-monitoring and perspective-taking, which are handled by control systems that go quieter in deep, vivid dreams. That's why third-person moments do happen, but they're rarer, and they often come with odd sensations, floating or switching places with someone else. So first person isn't a rule, it's the path of least resistance. The mind is a storyteller that seats us in the front row, because that's how it learned to guide a moving body through a world. Dreams show that habit, and they hint at something simple. Experience begins from a point of view. Why do dreams bring back people we miss? It often happens like this. The door opens, and they're there, and it feels ordinary. Our minds do that because dreams are built from memory and feeling. At night, the brain replays and reshapes our days and our past, and the strongest ties rise to the surface. Those ties live in networks that link sights, voices, places, and moments. When we miss someone, those networks fire more easily. With the outside world quiet, inside signals can spread, and a tiny cue pulls the whole pattern. The mind completes it, and suddenly they're walking, smiling, saying something we half remember. There's also emotion. In the vivid phase of dreaming, the brain's stress alarms turn down, so we can revisit sharp memories without the same sting. Feeling centers and memory centers talk, and they blend pictures with mood, and they try to update the story so it fits the world now. So it isn't magic or a message, it's care. The mind keeps the bond in reach while it learns how to carry it. That's why they return, not as ghosts, but as living patterns of love and habit. They come back because we're built to keep them with us. Why do dreams bring back people we dislike? It's odd that our minds pull back faces we'd rather avoid. At night, the brain isn't putting on a show, it's doing its housekeeping and its trial runs. Dreams are how memories and feelings get sorted. Charged moments get replayed because they need work, not rest. Disliked people carry strong emotional tags. The parts that judge and plan go a bit quiet, and the picture and feeling systems surge. The brain pulls fragments from many days and stitches a scene. Faces tied to anger, fear, or shame have strong links, so they pop up. It isn't revenge, it's maintenance. The mind tries to file the feeling into a story. Dreams also act like social rehearsal. We meet the old bully, and we run, or freeze, or finally speak, and those circuits practice. Threats are tested, choices weighed, with no real cost. The face may not even be that person, but a stand-in for a pattern that still troubles us. So they return because they matter to our learning. The brain favors what's unfinished, and it keeps bringing it back until the edges soften. Sometimes the face fades, or it changes role, and that's a sign the work took. Not magic or fate, just a mind completing its practice and moving on. Why do dreams stop suddenly? Sometimes a scene is bright and strange, and then it just blinks out, as if someone pulled a plug. That feeling isn't a failure of imagination, it's a switch. Through the night, the brain cycles through distinct modes, some that build vivid pictures, and others that quiet the stage. In the vivid mode, vision and emotion networks run hot and control networks relax, so the mind drifts and stitches meaning. Then, a small change happens. A sound, a shift in breathing, or a change in brain chemistry. The system flips toward waking focus, and the story engine loses power mid-sentence. There's also a trick of memory. The part that files long-term events is dialed down during dreaming, so endings don't get saved. When the mode flips, recall comes back before the scene does, and it feels like a cut. We remember the build-up, not the landing, so it seems abrupt. So, the sudden stop is the brain protecting rhythm and readiness. It pauses the inner theatre the instant the outside world needs attention, or when the cycle moves on. A clean break is faster than a slow fade, and that sharp edge is how a thinking organ keeps time with a moving world. Why do dreams continue when we fall back asleep quickly? It's because we tend to wake up right in the middle of the stage where dreams are active, and the brain hasn't fully switched modes. The narrative machinery is still running, just quieter, and the memory of the last scene is fresh. So the story is paused, not erased. In REM, the mind is vivid while the body is held still, and the brain's chemistry favors images and emotion. If we pop awake for a moment during that, the pattern of activity that made the scene doesn't vanish. It fades over minutes, not seconds. So falling back quickly lets the pattern light up again, right? There's also a kind of momentum. Faces, places, and goals from the dream are still held briefly in short-term memory, and the networks that link them are primed. So when we drift back within a minute or two, we often re-enter REM, and the brain re-stitches the same scene with the same cast. It happens most near morning, when REM periods grow longer and sit closer together, so it's easy to slide between waking and dreaming. Sometimes it even feels seamless, as if the room blends with the story. Dreams continue then because the system never reset. The projector dimmed, and then it brightened on the same frame. Why do dreams revive old emotions we thought were gone? Because emotions aren't deleted, they're stored with our memories. And most days we keep them quiet. At night, the mind goes offline from the world and turns inward, and it starts sorting. It replays fragments of life to strengthen what matters and to tidy what's tangled. And the feelings come attached to those fragments. Old scenes are linked by hidden threads, a face, a place, a tone, and when one lights up, the whole network wakes. The parts that guide restraint take a back seat, and the emotional circuits speak louder, so a new puzzle can pull up an old pattern, and the feeling rises with it. Dreams also run on a strange chemistry. The brain areas that tag threat and longing are active, and the usual control signals are softer, so the experience can feel raw. That's useful. It lets the mind rehearse without real risk, and sometimes it fades the charge, or rewrites what the story means. So those emotions weren't gone. They were quiet in storage, waiting for the right cue. The night brings the cues together in ways the day never would, and it asks, does this still fit who we are now? When it does, they settle. When it doesn't, they return, because we're still becoming. Why do dreams use childhood locations? Because the brain builds a map of the world very early, and that map never really goes away. The streets we learned first, and the rooms we knew by heart, become stable coordinates. So when a dream needs a place, it grabs what's vivid and ready. Old paths are strong and easy to link. In waking life, each place is stored as a network of sights, sounds, and roots. The brain cells that map space fire in patterns, and those patterns replay when we dream. Childhood gives them years of practice, so the school corridor or the garden returns, not as history, but as a working map. And there's feeling mixed into those maps. Early life is intense, and emotion marks memories, so they stand out. If today's worry rhymes with an old feeling, the dream links them. and suddenly a grown-up problem plays out in a childhood kitchen because the feeling fits and the place is already built. Dreams aren't trying to be accurate. They're trying to make meaning and keep memories flexible. Familiar ground lets the story bend while the map holds steady. That's why doors open to strange rooms and friends swap faces. The setting is old, but the question is new, and the past helps us think. Why do dreams invent entire buildings? Maybe because the brain is a builder, not a camera. It doesn't replay the day. It makes a world that feels consistent. And the simplest way to make a world is to lay out rooms and halls, corners and doors. So events have places to happen. It's quick and it's stable. Under the hood, there's a part that builds maps of places, stitching memories into scenes. It tracks where doors lead and how corridors bend. Neurons mark locations like pins on a mental floor plan, and from those pins, the mind can spin up staircases, foyers, basements, whole wings. At night, the chemistry changes and the builder gets playful, mixing old fragments with new worries. A friend's flat becomes a museum, a school grows a tunnel. The mind tries out possibilities and feelings, so it needs a safe stage with rules. Walls give rules. Doors promise choices and consequences. And there's a trick. The brain only renders what you look at and guesses the rest from pattern. So a whole skyscraper can feel complete even if only the lift and the lobby are drawn. We invent buildings because space is how thought holds together and stories need rooms. Why do we dream in places that don't exist? When the lights of the world drop away, the brain doesn't stop. It's built to model reality, so it keeps running the model. With little input coming in, it starts to fill the gaps, and it does that by reaching into memory and imagination. So whole landscapes appear, and they feel real for a while. It borrows pieces. A doorway from childhood, the light from a photo, a street with the wrong sky. The brain has a mapping system for places, and in dreams, it can free run. Cells that guide us by building a mental map start to remix the map. So impossible cities bloom from honest parts. Why make new places at all? Because the point isn't to replay the day. It's to sort memories, cool hot feelings, and test what might happen next. New settings loosen the rules. They let the brain try combinations it never sees when awake, and that helps it learn patterns and spot surprises. So, those strange rooms and vast coasts are tools. They're spaces built on the fly so the mind can practice without risk and repair itself and explore. They don't exist outside the skull, but they matter. We dream in places that don't exist because the brain is a maker as well as a witness. Why do we dream of impossible conversations? Because the mind is a storyteller that never stops, and talk is its favorite tool. It predicts what people might say, and it keeps doing that when the world is turned away. Without real voices to anchor it, the mind stitches one from memory and hope, and from fear, and we listen. It takes scraps of voices, faces, gestures, and glues them into a person. The part that checks facts eases off, so time and place can bend. A grandparent can stand beside a future boss, and a childhood friend can know today's worries, because the mind cares more about meaning than strict reality. That makes these scenes useful. They're social rehearsals. We try on apologies and courage. We run arguments to the end we didn't reach. We learn what we feel by hearing ourselves answer. And we practice reading others, because conversation is how we map each other, and the map needs constant updating. They feel real because the same circuits speak as in daytime talk. Language builds sentences. Hearing paints the voice. Emotion gives it weight. And without outside checks, the mind can join threads that never meet when we're awake. Sometimes that leaves a clue, or a little healing. Sometimes it's just wonder. Why do dreams feel honest, even when they aren't true. Dreams feel honest because honesty in the brain isn't only about facts. It's about how strong a signal feels and whether the story hangs together. When we dream, the brain builds a world from the inside out, and we stand inside it, so every detail comes pre-approved by the storyteller. When we dream, the front part that checks claims and asks hard questions goes quiet, and the emotion centers speak up. So doubt is softer, and feeling is louder. Vision and sound areas spark on their own, so images don't need outside cause. It all feels authored, and that reads as true. The brain is always guessing what comes next, and testing those guesses against signals. In waking life, the world pushes back and corrects us. In dreams, the pushback is weak, so predictions run free, and they line up with themselves. Memory fragments join the flow, and the match gives a sense of truth. So they can be false in fact, yet honest in feeling. A frightening chase may be wrong about the world, but right about our fear, or our need to act. A bright reunion may be wrong about time, but true about love. Dreams feel honest because meaning fires, and meaning feels like truth. Why do we sometimes dream in complete silence? It feels strange when a whole scene plays out and nothing makes a sound. In dreams, the brain isn't taking in noise from the outside. It's building the world from memory and guesswork, so it chooses what to show. If sound doesn't help the scene, or takes effort, the brain can leave it out. There are different kinds of dreams. In the deeper phases, they're more like thoughts with pictures, so they're often silent. In the phase with rapid eye movements, the sound system in the brain can light up, but it still turns on only when the story needs it. We get faces and places first, and feeling most of all. We also don't remember sound very well. On waking, the brain keeps the big shapes and the mood, but fine details fade, and sound fades fastest. Sometimes we just know someone spoke without hearing a voice, because meaning came without audio. For many people with hearing loss, dreams still have images and feeling, so sound isn't required. So, a silent dream isn't empty. It's the brain editing, like a careful filmmaker, keeping what carries the moment and dropping what doesn't. That choice can make a scene feel clear and even more strange. It shows that the mind is building a world, and it can leave whole senses out. The question is, why do we sometimes dream in overwhelming sound? It's strange when a dream isn't pictures but noise, like a siren flooding the skull. Why does it swell so much? Because a dream is a world made from the inside. The filters that favor real sounds ease off, and the hearing system turns inward, so loudness loses its anchor and can drift. Hearing works on prediction. Nerves pass along a best guess of what should be there, then compare it with what arrives. In a dream, almost nothing arrives from outside, so the check never lands. The guesses feed themselves, like a mic too close to a speaker, and volume climbs beyond reason. At the same time, emotion turns the knob. Fear and longing make the hearing circuits more alert, so faint signals get treated like alarms. The body hum is there too, blood rushing, breath, a distant fridge or a door, and the dreaming brain weaves them together, magnifies them, and calls it thunder. Hearing has always been our lookout in the dark, because it works in every direction and never needs light. So the dreaming mind leans on it when it builds a scene. Overwhelming sound is the price of a world without reference. It's the brain making sure silence can still be heard. Why do dreams glitch or skip scenes? Think about it like this. A dream isn't a film with an editor and a timeline. It's built on the fly by a brain that's busy, cut off from the world and flooded with images and feelings. The parts that keep track of order and rules go quiet, so space and time loosen, and jumps feel natural. During a REM, the phase where eyes dart and the brain is lively, The system that stamps events as before or after runs low. Vision areas fire, memory fragments surface, emotions steer. With little outside input, the brain predicts what should happen next, and it stitches whatever fits the mood of the moment. That's why a beach can flicker into a classroom, or a city can rotate into a childhood home. The link isn't a plot point, it's an association, often an emotion. The mind doesn't stop, it just accepts the cut. And later, recall is patchy, so gaps feel like skips we think we saw. So, these glitches aren't faults at all. They're the signature of a brain making a world from guesses, memories, and feeling. We see the same trick when awake, only steadier and anchored by the senses. In dreams, the anchor lifts, the edits show, and we notice the stitching of our own reality. Why do dreams show us things we never consciously noticed? Our senses drink in far more than attention allows, and attention is a narrow spotlight. Most of the day passes into quiet storage, as faint traces. Then, in dreams, the brain doesn't power down, it reorganizes. It replays scenes, snips and stitches, and looks for patterns we missed because the spotlight was elsewhere. We think noticing means awareness, but the brain keeps score in many places. It tags a color near a door, a tone in a voice, the tilt of a sign. When control regions relax, association areas roam, so distant pieces meet. A weak hint merges with a stronger memory, and an image forms. That's why a logo flashed from a bus becomes a cathedral wall. Or a stranger's laugh wears a friend's face. It feels odd, but it's a test. The brain is running little trials, asking what goes with what, so tomorrow's model of the world is sharper and faster when it matters. So dreams show the unnoticed because the unnoticed was never lost, only quiet. It sat in the wings, waiting for a link. When the mind loosens its grip on rules, those traces step forward, and we glimpse that the day went deeper than awareness, and the map inside is larger than we thought. The question is, why do dreams blend multiple people into one? Dreams are built from memory. A memory isn't a shelf of perfect snapshots. It's a web of pieces and feelings. A voice here, a walk there, a role. In dreams, there is no sight or sound to pin things down, so the brain guesses and pulls pieces that fit. Those pieces arrive together and start to merge. It's a pattern machine. Start with a hint, anger, care, a joke, and it completes the pattern with faces and names that mix. Faces are coded as features, distances between eyes, the curve of a smile, the sound of a name. When two people share enough shape or role, the brain completes both at once, so they fuse. Emotion steers the choice. If the point is safety, a parent's warmth and a partner's touch might mix. If the point is pressure, a boss and a teacher might blur. The dream cares about meaning more than record keeping, so it compresses several lives into one figure who carries the message. Awake, we do lighter versions of this. We mistake a stranger for a friend across the street, then look again and correct. In dreams, the correction never arrives, so the blend holds. It feels true because the feeling fits, and that's enough. Identity becomes a useful pattern, not a fixed file. Why do dreams carry emotions into the next day? Because a dream doesn't use a special set of feelings. It uses the same circuits that drive joy, fear, and anger in the day, and the body responds. Chemistry shifts, muscles prime, and the change is real, even if the story is made up. And when morning arrives, that chemistry doesn't reset in a blink. In the deep of the night, the brain replays and edits yesterday. The emotions centers fire strongly, while the brakes that judge and plan are softer, so feelings run vivid. Stress signals drop for a while, which lets the brain revisit hard scenes and test new endings without being overwhelmed. That work rewires tiny links between memory and emotion. When the alarm cuts in, the editing stops, but the state lingers. Hormones and heartbeat take minutes to settle, and those links bias what the mind notices. A small reminder in the day can light up the same path, and the mood from the dream steps forward. It's like a track, still warm from a train that just passed. That carryover can be useful. Fear that echoed overnight can teach, because the threat system was practicing, and joy can strengthen bonds by replaying what mattered, but it can also mislead. Not every leftover feeling points to truth, and naming it gives a choice, so the day can begin fresh. Why do dreams bring back old fears? Because the brain stores feelings with memories, not just facts. A fear isn't a single picture, it's a pattern spread across many cells. In the dark hours, small cues from the day can tug on that pattern, and a whole old story wakes, stitched together from bits and pieces we once carried. When we dream most vividly, in REM, the body is still, but the brain is busy. The senses are turned down, memory circuits replay and mix. Emotional centers fire, yet stress chemicals are lower, so the system can open a painful file without pulling the panic alarm and try to reshape it. That's why an exam you never studied for, or a hallway from childhood, can crash back in full color. The brain is running a what if, testing predictions, seeing if the fear still matters. Sometimes it writes a new ending and the charge fades, and sometimes it loops the old response again tonight. So, old fears return because they're not sealed away. They're living patterns that keep getting updated. A tiny reminder can light them until enough new experience says they're safe. Often, after we face the thing in daylight, the dream settles. And if it doesn't, it's a sign the work continues for now. Why are some dreams incredibly detailed? Sometimes a dream looks like a place you could touch. Brick lines, light on water. Why can it be so detailed? Because the brain isn't a camera, it's a maker. When the eyes are off duty, parts of the brain fire as if the world is present, and they start building one. In a phase called REM, activity in vision and movement areas rises, and the frontal checker that questions things goes quiet. Emotion circuits hum, so meaning feels thick. Brain chemistry shifts so patterns echo and sharpen, and tiny hints can explode into whole scenes with fine edges. The memory index pulls bits from yesterday and years ago, and the cortex stitches them together. It fills gaps with best guesses, like a game engine that renders textures when we turn our heads. With no outside signals to correct it, the model can bloom with extra detail. It happens more when we've learned a lot, felt strong emotion, or half woken so the scene gets stamped into recall. Some nights it's foggy, some nights it's crystal, because the same system that predicts the world by day is free to show its workings. That's what we're seeing. Why do some dreams feel unfinished? We wake in the middle of a scene, and it feels like the story cut out. That isn't because there was a hidden ending we missed. It's because the brain builds dreams on the spot, moment by moment, with no script. So there isn't a last page waiting. There's only whatever comes next. At night, the brain moves through stages, and in the REM stage, the eyes flicker and the cortex is busy. A sound, a turn, a change in chemistry can pull us out mid-build. And the instant we wake, the brain's recording gear turns down, so fragile traces break apart. Dreams also care less about plot, and more about feelings and prediction. The brain is testing patterns, solving little puzzles, and trying out responses. When the feeling shifts, the scene shifts, because the job is ongoing. So stories jump, characters swap, doors open to somewhere else, and it all feels unresolved. Sometimes we wake before an emotional knot is tied, and sometimes the memory unravels first. And sometimes there was never an ending to reach, only a process still turning. Unfinished is what a living system looks like when caught mid-thought. It lingers because the mind wants to finish the line. Why do dreams change characters mid-scene? In a dream, the brain isn't playing back a recording. It's making a scene as it goes, using guesses when the senses aren't feeding much in. So a person isn't stored as one solid package. There's a face, a voice, a role, a feeling, and those pieces can slip as the story moves. Parts of the brain that keep track of logic take a back seat, and reality checking is loose. The system that binds features into one identity is working with fragments, so pattern completion fills gaps. A hint of a laugh or a coat can pull a different memory. The prediction updates and the person flips. Emotion leads the way. We often know who someone is by what they mean to us, not just by the face. If the feeling shifts from help to authority, the brain swaps in the person who fits that meaning. So a friend becomes a parent, yet the role stays the same, and the plot keeps going. Even when we're awake, memory can mislabel and merge, and we only notice later. Dreams run that process faster, with fewer breaks, so the model of the world keeps revising itself. Characters change mid-scene because identity is a moving guess. The mind builds people from purpose and reshapes them as meaning shifts. Why do dreams feel darker when we're overtired? When we push far past tired, the brain runs on alert chemistry. Stress hormones like cortisol rise, and adrenaline-like signals keep us switched on. The front part that weighs options eases off, and the threat detector gets loud. So when images start to form, the stage is set for darker plots and sharper feelings. Dreaming loves emotion, and it borrows whatever mood we bring. There's a cycle: deep, quiet repair first, then a dream-heavy phase where memories mix into stories. If we're deprived, the brain grabs the deep part early, then rebounds with longer, fiercer dreaming. With the editor still tired, emotion drives and the tales turn stormy. Overtired nights are choppy with brief wakes and starts. Those breaks tend to catch us during the dream-heavy phase, so we remember the most intense scenes. And memory has a bias toward threat, because learning from danger once kept us alive. So the mind practices, exaggerates the edge, and the aftertaste feels darker. Put it together, and it's simple. Stress chemistry turns up the volume, control dials turn down, and rebound dreaming runs hot and broken, so shadows spread across the story. Rest resets the mix and steadies the editor. Then the same machinery can explore the world again, and the stories don't lean so hard toward night. Why do dreams mirror our insecurities? Because dreams run on, feeling more than logic. At night, the brain keeps working, and the brakes on self-control ease, so emotion has the front seat. The parts that scan for danger light up, and the tidy planner goes quieter, so small doubts get amplified into scenes we can see and feel. So, the mind sorts the day, pulls old memories, and stirs them with what we expect might happen. Unfinished worries carry a strong signal, because in our history, missing a threat was costly. The system oversamples the uncertain and rehearses it, the way a pilot runs drills in rough weather. That's why the story often looks strange, but the feeling is exact. Lost teeth, missed trains, being unprepared on a stage. They point to loss, time, and judgment. The plot is theatre, but the emotion is data. It's a mirror, not to punish us, but to make the risk visible. And it helps. By stretching a fear until we notice it, the brain marks what needs learning or care. We adjust small habits, we practice answers, we seek help, even if we don't link it to the dream. So dreams mirror our insecurities, because they're our oldest classroom for staying alive. Why do dreams exaggerate emotions? It's odd how a tiny worry becomes a chase. and a kind face becomes love that feels endless. The brain is running with the world turned down and the inside turned up. So feelings take the lead, and the usual brakes on passion and fear aren't pressing as hard. So the picture is high contrast and emotion stands out. Under the hood, the feeling circuits are lively, especially the amygdala, which tags danger and desire, and the executive parts at the front are quieter, so logic and self-control step back. The chemistry shifts too. Dopamine, the signal for meaning and wanting, runs high, while noradrenaline and serotonin run low. That mix turns small sparks into flares, and it isn't a bug. The brain is testing its model of life without noisy senses, so it pushes on what matters most, which is feeling. It replays hard moments and bright ones to reshape memory, and it rehearses danger and desire to keep us ready. So the stories go big, because big feelings write clearer notes on the mind. We wake with a racing heart or a glow, and the real world looks different by a small degree. The edges are sharper, choices make more sense. Dreams turn up emotion to help a quiet brain learn in the dark. Why do dreams create impossible geography? Because in dreams, the brain isn't measuring the world, it's building one. With the senses mostly quiet, the scene-making networks pull pieces from memory and stitch them together. They care about a story that flows, not about street maps. So, rooms fuse, doors open onto oceans, and the join feels natural. Our navigation system runs on patterns. It keeps a rough map made of places and the paths between them. When it runs on memories alone, the lines can slip and loop. It's like tracing a city from memory and taking shortcuts. Corners fold. Familiar halls meet mountains, and the brain accepts the shortcut. Feeling steers the edits. If two moments share an emotion, the brain drags them close, even if they're years or miles apart. Meaning beats measurement, and the part that checks consistency eases off, so contradictions don't ring alarm bells. What matters is connection, so space bends to link what the mind is exploring. That's why a house can hide endless rooms, and a street can lead both forward and back. It isn't a failure of mapping, it's a glimpse of a different rule set, where relationships are the geometry. Dreams show a mind freed from rulers and roads, revealing how thought arranges the world to understand itself. Why do dreams feel like memories? It's strange how a dream can sit in the mind like something that happened, with a place, a time, and a mood. That feeling isn't magic, it's craft. The brain builds scenes when we dream, and it uses the same builder it uses for real days, the machinery of remembering and imagining. During the vivid phase, the eyes twitch and the mind is busy stitching, and the part that checks facts is quieter. So the story flows without hard questions, and it gets stamped as mine. The hippocampus, the brain's filing clock for events, helps link moments into a path, which already feels like memory. And dreams borrow from what we've lived. Faces we know, streets we've walked, worries we've carried, all get reused and remixed. Strong feelings fire during these scenes, which is why they stick for a moment. Emotion is glue, and the mind keeps what feels important, even if the source wasn't the day. But they fade because the brain's chemical setting is different, so storage is weak even when the feeling is strong. We wake and try to pin them down, and that tidy-up can make them seem even more like episodes. In truth, they're constructions built with memory's tools, and believed, briefly, as real. Why do dreams make us feel watched? Maybe it begins with survival. We're tuned to notice eyes, because eyes mean intention, and intention can help or harm. A mind that guesses there's a watcher makes fewer deadly mistakes than one that doesn't. So we carry a hair-trigger presence alarm, and it fires even when nothing's there. In dreams, the world's input drops, and the brain leans on guesses. It fills blank rooms with faces and turning corners with eyes. We have fast circuits that spot gaze and read intent, and they keep buzzing. So a watcher appears, stitched from memory, shadows, and the feeling that something is about to happen. There's another layer. The mind can split roles, so part of us acts while another part observes and learns. That inner audience helps us practice social life, but it can slip into a character. And because emotion runs high in REM, the vivid dream phase, while control runs low, the observer feels powerful and we feel seen. Even waking, a creak in the dark can raise the same alarm, and dreams turn that dial further. It's safer to imagine eyes than to miss them, so the model errs on watchers. That's why the room feels crowded sometimes. It's the cost of a cautious brain, and it mostly serves us well. Why do some dreams feel like someone else's life? A dream drops us into a city we've never seen, and we carry keys that fit doors we never owned. It feels like a stolen life, and that's odd. The mind is always telling a story about who we are, because it has to predict the next moment. When outside signals fade, that story runs on itself. So, the brain starts sampling memories and scraps of imagination, and it stitches them into scenes that make enough sense to keep the story going. The part that checks facts and tracks time isn't leading, so identity loosens. The narrator can slip, and the point of view can land in a different life that still feels coherent. That happens because the brain doesn't just replay, it rehearses. It tests what-ifs and runs futures and backstories like little simulations. It borrows faces from a bus and rooms from a film, and it fills the gaps with feeling. Emotion is glue, so the scene holds, and borrowed lives feel strangely owned. And when morning comes, there can be an ache for places that never were. That's the self-model stretching, and discovering it can wear more shapes than we expect. It isn't a message from elsewhere. It's the same mind that lives our days, practicing other paths, so ours makes better sense. Why do dreams bring up forgotten moments? Memory isn't a neat shelf. It's a web that's always being rewired, even when we're off the clock. In that off-duty state, the brain replays parts of the day and files them away. And while it does, older traces get brushed. They're faint, but they're still there, waiting to be touched. The brain doesn't store movies, it stores patterns, sights, sounds, feelings. When one pattern fires, neighbors fire. A face from today matches a face from years ago, so the older scene lights up. The dream stitches them, because the goal isn't a true record, it's a better map for tomorrow. Emotions push this along. Strong feelings mark memories with a signal, and a similar feeling can call an old scene back. And the clock is loose in dreams, so pieces from different years sit side by side. Filters that keep weaker links down are lowered, and faint paths suddenly carry a vivid charge. So we wake with a hallway from childhood, or a bus ride we'd lost. It isn't magic. It's the system testing links, hunting patterns that help us predict and plan. Forgotten often means unasked, not erased. Dreams are the sweep that asks again, and sometimes they find something worth keeping. Why do dreams drop us into the middle of a story? It's like walking into a theatre and the play has already started. That feeling isn't a trick. It's how the brain builds scenes. When we dream, the mind isn't writing a tidy plot from page 1. It's stitching together whatever's vivid and urgent now. So it opens on action because action holds attention. Parts that track order and plan ahead are dialed down, while emotion and imagery light up. Memory stores toss up fragments, the visual system paints them into a place, and the storytelling network links them. Without strong timestamps or strict editing, the scene starts midstream and just carries us along. And there's another piece. We usually remember only the last moments before waking, because new memories don't stick well during dreams. So whatever came before fades, and what survives feels like chapter 7. We then backfill causes on the spot, which makes the entry feel sudden and strangely convincing. It fits how stories work in life. We rarely notice the beginning of a change. We notice the moment it bites. Dreams use that rule to test fears, replay puzzles, and try out moves, fast. The middle is where the stakes are, so that's where the mind likes to begin. Why do dreams repeat themes across cultures? It's striking that people who never meet still dream of falling, being chased, losing teeth, or showing up unprepared. That happens because human brains are built from the same plan, and they face the same core problems. Dreams look like the brain running simulations, so it can test feelings and actions without risk. And shared problems tend to make shared stories. When outside signals drop, the brain still keeps the lights on, and it guesses. It pulls pieces from memory, from body feelings, and from habits. The balance system can misfire, so you feel a drop or a lift. The fear circuits spark, so a chase begins, and your legs won't move because the body is turned down. That makes sense if dreams are a kind of threat rehearsal. Being chased, lost, late, or exposed are all about survival and social standing. The mind runs through them to learn. Teeth falling out may come from the brain's map of the face, mixed with worries about change and health. Culture paints the costumes, but the plot holds. So, themes repeat because our bodies and needs repeat. We're born with the same senses. We grow, we compete, we love, we fear loss, and we hope. Dreams compress those big forces into simple scenes that stick. Different places add details, but the heart of the story is human. And that's why it returns. Why does the brain recycle dream characters? Because the brain doesn't invent from nothing. It builds with what it has. Dreams are stories made by the parts that predict the next moment, and they reach into memory for characters. So we meet old friends, teachers, strangers from a train, because they're already mapped, and they fit into the scene quickly. During the night, memory traces are replayed and strengthened. The hippocampus, the brain's memory hub, sends little bursts of yesterday, and the cortex tries to make sense of them. When there's a gap, the brain's habit of finishing patterns kicks in, so a familiar face drops in, because that saves effort and keeps the story flowing. Emotion steers the cast. People tied to fear, joy, or loss are tagged as important, so they show up. And characters often blur, because the brain stores faces as features and averages. So a stranger in a dream can be a mix of 5 people, built fast from the most useful parts. Recycling also trains us. The social brain rehearses talk, conflict, and care using known players, so rules and feelings are updated without risk. It's a way to file memories and test predictions at the same time. The brain keeps a cast on hand and runs scenes, so tomorrow makes more sense. Why do some dreams feel connected to each other? It's strange when a dream feels like a place we've already walked. I think that happens because the mind isn't starting from zero each night, it's carrying momentum. After long days, it replays pieces of life to file and fix them, and strong feelings mark the pieces worth replaying, so the same patterns light up again. Those patterns are like a set of paths in the brain. When one part fires, neighbors join in, and the mind fills gaps with whatever fits. That's why the same house returns, or the same ocean, or the same people. The brain is a prediction machine, so once a scene begins, it completes it in a familiar way. Dreaming comes in rounds through the night, and later rounds can pick up threads from earlier ones. And across days, similar moods call up the same networks. Stress, hope, guilt, love. So we re-enter the same storylines. We even stitch scattered moments together when we wake. Because the mind loves a plot that makes sense. So some links are real replays, and some are our storytelling after the fact. Either way, the feeling tells us something deep. The brain is trying to learn, to settle unfinished business, and it uses the same stage to do it. That's why they feel like chapters, and why they matter when morning comes. Why do some dreams feel too real? Because the brain doesn't wait for daylight to make a world. It does it anyway, and it uses the same tools. In the small hours, vision maps hum, sound maps hum, and body maps are ready, but the muscles are held still. So vivid scenes rise from inside, not from the room around us. When the doors of the senses are mostly shut, the brain keeps asking the same question: what's out there? It guesses causes, like it does by day, and it tests them against memory. Faces, streets, rain on glass. With no raw input to correct it, the guess can feel perfect, and feeling turns the volume up. The parts that flag danger and joy run hot, and the part that questions the story settles down. So leaps in plot don't trip us, and time stretches or snaps. The body is pinned for safety, yet the inner maps move, so motion feels real. By morning, the brain has also been sorting and strengthening memories, and it borrows pieces for its stories. A door slams outside and becomes thunder. A worry from yesterday becomes a chase. That mix of real signals and strong feeling seals the illusion. It shows how powerful our world building really is. Why do some dreams feel clearly fake? Some dreams feel like cardboard sets, and some feel like we've stepped into another life. That difference starts with what a dream is. The brain building a world without the usual stream of sights and sounds. It has to use memory, emotion, and guesses, and it fills gaps with whatever fits in the moment. Realness depends on two players. There's a builder that stitches scenes and stories, and there's a checker behind your forehead that asks if things add up. Most of the time, the checker is turned down, so flying houses seem fine, but sometimes it flickers on and the seams start to show. It also changes with timing. As we drift toward waking, sounds from the room and the weight of the body leak in, and the brain tries to patch them into the story. The patchwork can't keep pace, so faces blur and rules wobble, and the whole thing starts to feel made up. Memory plays a part too. When the brain pulls scraps from recent days without the fine detail, it fills holes with guesses, and that thin texture feels artificial. Strong emotion can mask this and make a dream feel solid, but without it, we notice the scaffolding. That's the mind catching itself in the act. Why do dreams show things we don't want to see? Maybe dreams aren't built to please us. They're built to keep the mind in shape. When we're off the stage of the day, the brain sorts memories, tunes emotions, and updates its picture of the world. It pulls forward what's loud and unfinished, and the things we avoid are often the loudest. During vivid dreaming, the break on thought is looser and the feeling centers are stronger. So fear, shame, and grief get room to speak, and they tend to show up as scenes. The mind runs little what-if drills, mixing fragments of the day with old scars, because rehearsal builds readiness without real risk. Think of a test you dread, or a fight, or a loss that still stings. The dream bends it, stretches it, and tries different endings, and bit by bit the charge can fade. It isn't punishment, it's maintenance, and sometimes it leaves a clue about what we need to face when we wake. But not every scene has a purpose we can name. Some are noise from a busy brain, and we search it for meaning after. Even so, the pattern holds. What matters most, especially what we avoid, gets priority. It can feel harsh, but it's how a living mind keeps us honest and ready. Why do dreams show things we wish were real? Maybe because the brain never clocks off, even when the lights are out. The world falls quiet and there's less to measure, so it turns inward and runs on memory and desire. It pulls up the unfinished jobs, the longings we carry, and the moments that still spark. So the mind starts to build little worlds. Parts that track reward and threat burn bright, and the tidy editor that checks logic relaxes. That shift makes wishes feel near because the brain is free to combine pieces without strict rules. It's not granting anything, it's exploring what would happen if the thing we want came true. And it works both ways. We see the prize and the pitfall. So we practice joy and we practice loss. Before a big test, we might soar through it or forget the paper. After a breakup, someone returns for one more talk. The brain is rehearsing feelings and stitching memories. By running these trials at night, the brain updates its map of the world and our place in it. Desires stay vivid because they mark goals. They're beacons for planning. So dreams show wishes not to fool us, but to help us move toward them, or let them go. Why do dreams feel random even when they aren't? Because the mind at night is freed from the world, and it wanders. There's no steady stream of sights and sounds to anchor it, so it turns inward. It pulls from memory and feeling, and it follows associations. That path is real, but the steps are hidden. During the dreaming phase, the part that checks facts and keeps plans goes quiet, and the parts that tag memories with emotion turn up. The brain is still predicting, but it has little outside input, so it fills gaps. It jumps from one linked memory to another because a feeling connects them. And when we wake, we enter a very different state. We remember short flashes, not the bridges between them, because recall is patchy. The oddest moments stick, and the quiet links fall away, so we tell it back as a jumble, and it feels random, even though the chain was there. Look closely, and they often carry traces of what we care about. A worry from the day, an old fear, a hope we barely admit. The mind rehearses, solves, and weaves memories together. They aren't random. They're exploration under different rules, and the strangeness is the distance between those rules and daylight thought. Why do dreams follow us into waking thoughts? You wake, and a scene from the night is somehow still here. It lingers because the brain doesn't flip a switch between modes. The same circuits that imagine, remember, and plan were busy making a story, and they don't stop on command. So the story keeps running for a while, and feelings are still high, so they tug our thoughts back. At night, the brain replays bits of the day and edits them. It files some memories, throws out others, and links many to strong feelings. That linking makes them sticky. A face, a fear, a hope. They get stamped together, so when the system powers back up, the bundle comes with it. The emotion pulls the image, and the image pulls the thought. Sometimes a hard day turns into a chase, and the chase turns into a morning worry. Or a future test becomes a maze, and the maze nudges how we plan breakfast. We also carry cues. A song or a scent on waking can grab the same network, and the night scene flashes again. The brain loves patterns, so it completes them if it can. So dreams follow because there isn't a wall between night and day, only a door that opens slowly. Imagination, memory, and prediction are one machine, and momentum matters. The images fade, but the patterns often stay, and they steer thought. That's useful. It keeps lessons alive, and sometimes it sparks new ideas. Why does the brain dream at all? One honest answer is we don't fully know, but there's a shape to the idea. The brain never really switches off. It's a prediction machine, always guessing what comes next. When the senses go quiet, that model runs without outside input, so it generates its own world, and we live inside it. In that world, yesterday's moments are replayed and edited. Short-term memories are taught to long-term networks, like a teacher going over notes until they stick. A phase marked by rapid eye movement seems key for this, because the body is held still while patterns race and fragments get woven into stories. Dreams also work on feeling. Stress signals drop, so the brain can revisit hard events without the usual spikes and reshape them. And there's rehearsal. We face danger in made-up scenes and try out responses. That's useful in a changing world because practice without cost gives an animal an edge. Then there's housekeeping. Billions of connections grew during the day, and not all are worth keeping. So activity sweeps through and trims the weak ones and strengthens the useful paths. Out of that tidy up, odd combinations appear and sometimes new ideas. It's maintenance and training and a hint of invention.